Hey guys, so a couple nights ago we had some thunderstorms roll through and it got me to thinking about an old recipe that I haven't used this year but I have used in previous years. But basically it's how to create a thunderstorm in a bottle. It's very simple. A master gardener I know once actually used this in some of his gardens and it made a huge difference. If you've ever noticed, when a thunderstorm rolls through, you'll see a spurt of growth, you'll see a lot more green, you'll see your plants looking overall healthy, and a lot of people think it's because of the rain that came through, and actually a lot of times it's a combination of the rain and what's in the rain. Lightning produces nitrogen in the atmosphere when it goes off, and it eventually makes its way down to your vegetable plants, anything you have growing in the yard, down to your root system. So I'm going to show you how to make it, recreate it in your small bottle here, so you can do it a thunderstorm in a bottle, if I can get that out just right. Thunderstorm in a bottle anytime on your garden. Now this is a really simple recipe, and if you're a member of the Patreon, I'll put a much more detailed PDF there. You can download it to your phone, you can print it out as I've done here, you can save it, whatever your iPad or device, and it's going to give a lot more detail. I'm skimming over the surface. You'll still get the complete idea in this video, but if you are a member of the Patreon, you can download that for free. If you're a paid member, you can also just buy a copy of it if you don't want to become a member. So take a look at that and you'll get a much deeper understanding of what a thunderstorm in a bottle is and how it works. So let's get started on creating this recipe. One of the simplest recipes I use, but it has a profound effect in your vegetable garden. Now the first thing I always talk about is the water, and we want to make sure that our water isn't just standard tap water. Either it needs to be highly filtered through a good carbon filter, or do what I do here in the greenhouse. I've got a rain catch. I catch it all in a large barrel, and then that way I can use the very pure water. And it's going to already have, since we just went through that thunderstorm, it's already going to have some of the ingredient there, but we're going to make an artificial version of something that happens naturally, but it works just as well. Now, if you're only wanting to do the most basic recipe, it's just really one item, but I've got 3 additional items that I'm going to show you how to add to this recipe and make an even bigger difference. So what we're talking about today is ammonia, and it is what was the master gardener that I told you about earlier. He referred to it as a thunderstorm in a bottle. That's how well it worked. And so you're only using 1 tablespoon of ammonia. Another thing you want to make sure is the ammonia that you're using, make sure that it's not scented or flavored in any way. You want it to be just pure ammonia, and you're going to only use 1 teaspoon, not tablespoon, 1 teaspoon. And so we're going to try to do this without making a huge mess. 1 teaspoon per gallon. This is the gallon size recipe. So if you're going to upsize it and make 4 gallons, if you have a large backpack sprayer, as I showed in a lot of videos, or if you're going down to a quart, you just need to divide the correct amount till you don't overdo it with ammonia. We want to be very gentle with this formula, but it is a very powerful formula at the same time. Now you could just do the thunderstorm in a bottle with that 1 item, which is the nitrogen, but I'm going to show you 3 things that can help boost it. And we're going to use some of our rain catch water here, and I'm just going to fill up half a mason jar, and then I'll reintroduce it back to our gallon size container. Now a lot of people always ask me this about storing it. I would recommend that you use this right away. So if you don't have a large garden, don't make a gallon, just make a fraction of a gallon. Divide properly the amount from a teaspoon. It's a little complicated there, but you can find that easily online. So just make sure that you do that. You make it appropriate for your garden size. If you need to upsize it, you can do that. Now 3 things you can add to this to really help it, to help with the microbes in the soil and to help with overall plant growth. The first thing is a compost tea, and I'll show you exactly how I've done this. I've taken some of the compost that's in my composter and I put it in one of these extremely fine mesh bags because I don't want this clogging up my sprayer as I go through the garden. I just swirl it around there until a lot of it has leached out into our very clean water. I'm gonna let that go. We're only using a small amount of this as well, and there's 2 other ingredients that we need to add, but just remember that when you're doing this, if you're using any type of sprayer, make sure that you don't just put a clump of your compost, whether you're using store-bought compost or your own composter. And I'll show you the one I use and I'll give you a link to that description. So just make sure that you use an ultra-fine mesh. I'll put a link in the description, some of these, to make sure. Now you could use something like a t-shirt. I just like these little bags because they're really handy, and I also use it on a lot of my fruit trees to cover up the fruit as they're growing, to keep any insects from coming in and doing any damage. Now I'm going to try to turn this sideways and not make a spillage there. We're using 1 tablespoon of our compost tea, and depending on how well your compost is aged, you'll get a little bit darker liquid. As you can see right here, this one is pretty dark, but it just depends on how much compost you make. Let me give you a quick glimpse of my homemade composter. Now this is my homemade composter. It's really easy to make from an inexpensive trash can. Take a look at this video and it'll help you understand how this is made, but that's where the compost in our little bag here originated from. I just create my own compost whenever I'm cutting greens or browns out of the garden. I'll carefully layer it, put the right amount of water on it, and also I've introduced some really effective helpers in the garden, which are just your normal earthworms. And I always recommend, if you don't have a lot of earthworms in your garden, that could be a symptom that your soil is not as healthy as it could be. So you just want to make sure that you bring earthworms, whether you're getting them from a store, a bait shop, or just open ground. You can dig around in some thick leaf foliage in the forest and you can find earthworms almost anywhere just with a little bit of digging. So take a look at that if you want to create your own homemade composter. But that's our first additional ingredient, is our compost tea. I think I said tablespoon, I believe it's 1 tablespoon. So guys, the next thing we're adding is 1 teaspoon of a fish emulsion, and I will tell you, even though it says low odor there, it is not low odor. It's very noticeable in its smell, but it really helps our garden. It adds a lot of nutrients to the soil. So this is an optional item, as is with the other thing, the compost tea. I had to think there for a minute. I was having a senior moment. But it's optional. So you could literally do the Thunderstorm in a bottle with just the ammonia, but I just wanted to add a few additional ingredients to really boost the overall health. Now that can be a little bit harder to find, so I'll put a link in the description, but some garden centers will carry it, some will not. A lot of people will complain about the odor once they've used it. So again, this is an optional item. Now the third item is molasses, and I talk a lot about molasses because there's minerals in it. There's going to be ingredients in this, sugars, natural sugars that are going to help feed the soil. So microbes are going to benefit quite a bit. We're going to add 1 tablespoon, not teaspoon. We're actually adding 1 tablespoon to our formula. I'm going to mix that as well. And remember, don't store your molasses in a refrigerator because it will be super thick. So I would recommend leaving it in your potting shed, greenhouse, or garage so it can stay at room temperature or maybe even slightly above room temperature. So this is really important because it helps feed the microbes, and it also helps the plant overall in its leaf structure, foliar feeding, soil drenching, whatever method you use. But as I said, this is a foliar and a soil drench, so I'm doing both with this formula, and I'll show you 2 different ways I apply it as well. Now I may be repeating myself because I'm trying to remember if I mentioned this, but again, this is not something you're going to create and store it. So only make what you're going to use at that time when you're feeding your garden, and you're not going to put this on a shelf and store it because it can lose potency and it can go bad over time. Now I'll show you the large backpack sprayer I use when I'm going over my areas in the garden where I would need to cover a very large area, but I wanted to show you today the solo sprayer as well. If you haven't seen these before, they work great. I think I have 5 or 6 of them. They're not too expensive. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add our formula back to our bottle. Use my homemade funnel here I made from a 2-liter bottle. And so remember, what we're mixing up here is for 1 gallon. So there we go. We have 1 gallon. I may need to do a little bit more mixing there because it looks like some of the molasses didn't quite mix, and that's usually a problem with this formula. I usually take a little bit more time to do heavy mixing, but just make sure you get all the molasses in the fish formula off of the bottom because it will sometimes settle. You may have to do that 2, possibly 3 times. I think I got a majority of it that time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in my solo sprayer, and this is not a gallon. I believe it's about half a gallon, so I'll put a link in the description if you don't have one. But I'm going to go around the garden and do foliar feeding, and then with the rest of this I'm going to do soil drenching methods as well. And I'll give you a quick look. When I'm doing a huge area, I might triple the size of this formula and use it in my extra large backpack sprayer, which I'll show you right now. So this is my large backpack sprayer. It's a 20-volt battery-powered backpack sprayer. I used to have the kind that you had to hand pump, and by the time you got through doing a large garden area, your arm would be killing you. So this particular brand is in very low stock, so I'll either put the link to this exact one or the second best one, which I have in another part of the greenhouse that I use. So I have 2 of these that are battery powered. I still have some of my old hand pump types, but if you're covering a large area, this will hold up to 4 gallons, so you can get ornamentals, your vegetable garden, even grass areas would benefit from this recipe, because grass does the same thing when a thunderstorm comes through. You'll have a sudden spurt of growth and everything will be just almost a fluorescent green. So take a look in the description if you don't already have a battery powered. I highly recommend these because my arm would be killing me after about 2 hours of doing work around the garden with the old pump style. So as far as the rate, once we've mixed it in our gallon size container, as I said, you can, for the 4-gallon container, just quadruple the size. But as far as how much we add to a specific plant, I would recommend doing a small test area because some plants can be more sensitive. To be completely safe, you might only add this to the soil to begin with and just do a very small area of whatever plant, whether it's tomato, pepper, on the leaf to make sure there's not a negative reaction. But for a small plant up to 12 inches, I'd recommend 1 cup as a soil drench. 12 inches up to 24 inches, I'd recommend probably 2 cups. And then when you're talking about a full-size plant that's really large, up to 36 inches, and most of my plants in my garden are 36 to 48 once they become mature, 3 cups for that. So just remember, we're not trying to overdo it on the foliar feeding. I think I'm leaning a lot more towards the soil drenching method in just a very, very light spray. I might actually weaken this by 50% if I'm going to do an overall foliar feeding. But again, do that 24-hour test and make sure that the plant doesn't have a negative reaction when you do a foliar feeding. Some people recommend only doing this as a soil drench. So again, if you're willing to test and wait, then you can see what's going to happen to that plant, because you don't want to do this over your entire garden and have a massive failure. Now right here on the screen, I'm going to put off to one side all the plants that I've tried this on, all the vegetables and herbs that it worked extremely well with. I will, however, give you one piece of advice. When you're doing this on tomatoes or peppers, do it early in the season, and once the flowering starts, you start seeing a lot of flowers, then back off and maybe not use it at that point. Now that's for tomatoes and peppers. Everything else in that list, you can use it about every 3 to 4 weeks in the garden, and it'll make a huge difference. Now I wanted to give you a glimpse across the garden. I'm seeing a lot of good growth. We haven't hit May yet, and I'm seeing a lot of positive results. So I don't use this on every plant, but I test it on at least 1 plant in each bed. And so the times that I would recommend using this is early spring growth, after transplanting, once the plants are established. Don't use this on seedlings. When leaves look paler green, use it then. During rapid vegetative growth, and after a heavy rain has washed the nutrients out of your soil. If you have a lot of sand in your soil, a lot of times the nutrients can be washed out. So remember, this is a good thing to do after you've had a super heavy rain. Even if it wasn't a thunderstorm, which that would definitely boost it, but if you just had a normal heavy rain without the lightning and thunder, go ahead and do this. It's the perfect time to do it. And then also before plants begin heavy flowering and fruiting, specifically with tomatoes and peppers. So let's talk for a second about how ammonia creates this process of lightning. Let's talk about lightning as well. Lightning is something that really benefits our vegetable gardens. It's really useful when we have a huge thunderstorm come through. As long as it doesn't do damage to your plants, you're going to see massive growth and sudden fruiting and flowering just probably less than a week after that. So basically, household ammonia contains ammonium hydroxide, and this will provide a form of nitrogen related to ammonium nitrogen. Plants need this because nitrogen helps build your chlorophyll, your new leaves, your green stems, your proteins, your enzymes, your strong vegetative growth, and overall plant vigor. So this is how this is recreated. I'm going to post some pictures of some of my favorite lightning shots I've got. So lightning, as it passes through the air, air contains mostly nitrogen gas. The lightning energy helps convert some of the atmospheric nitrogen into nitrogen compounds. The rain will then carry some of those nitrogen compounds down to the soil, and after the storm, plants may suddenly appear greener, fresher, and more vigorous. And I've often seen growth almost doubling within just a few days after a heavy lightning thunderstorm. So that's why gardeners are going to always notice a green up effect after a big lightning storm or a summer storm comes through. Now, if you're not growing in large raised beds or an open ground situation with your vegetables, and you're growing everything like on a patio or a balcony, if you live in an apartment or a patio home, and you're growing in a very small area and in a lot of containers, I would recommend reducing it from 1 teaspoon to half a teaspoon per gallon. Everything else can remain the same, but we want to try to cut back a little bit on the ammonia because it can have a kind of a concentrated effect in containers, especially if you're growing a large tomato plant in a little bit of a small container. So just remember, you can cut it in half and still have the great effects of ammonia or Thunderstorm in a bottle from growing in very small containers. So guys, if you're a member of the Patreon, please don't forget to download this information. You can save it to your device, or if you're not a member of the Patreon, you can just purchase it outright. But it really makes a huge difference in your vegetable garden. Just doing this about every three to 4 weeks, and except with peppers and tomatoes, where once you see a lot of flowering taking place, then you can ease off of that and see how it goes. But do a lot of testing. Only test small areas of the plant if you're going to do a foliar feeding. You can stick with the root drench method, that's fine. It will work just as well because the roots will absorb all of the good stuff that we've put into the soil, and it will benefit the plant overall. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you have a question or comment, I hope you'll become a subscriber first. I tend to put those questions to the very front of the line. I get a ton of questions and comments, so it's nearly impossible considering the amount of work I do in the real world and in my garden, so it's really tough sometimes to keep up with everything. But I'll do my best to make sure that you're at the very front of the line if it's an important question that I need to answer. So guys, I really appreciate you watching, and have a great day.